the county prepared for...
Hold on, guys, I can't hear your
The
question.
city of Pasco is being sued already. Is the county commissioners and the county prepared for civil lawsuits after this year's decision?
I can't imagine what the liability would be against Franklin County. We weren't there at the scene.
But what your decision?
It was my
work for the
decision.
county,
Yeah, it's my decision, absolutely.
and you work for the county.
So what you're asking for is, does the county get sued because they make decisions not to charge or to charge
Because you work for
individuals?
the county, and
Right.
and you are employed by the county, and you're making the decisions
Right.
on behalf of the county. Is the county prepared for civil lawsuits? Is my question.
The question that you're at, first we have to evaluate, we could always get sued. The real question is, what possible scenario would it be that I or even Franklin County would be sued under this scenario because we were not participants in the use of force?
So you weren't concerned in making your decision because you knew you wouldn't be able to get sued then?
I don't understand what you think I'd be getting sued over.
That's my question. That's exactly my question.
I make tough decisions every day, and I don't care what the consequences of those are when it's based on sound legal judgment. If I'm to base charging decisions based on, oh my, these people want me to charge, I'm not going to go charge an innocent person that I know based on the law I cannot prosecute that person and get a conviction. Then I could be brought to ethical violations before the state bar, as well as I'd be violating my oath of office. And I've said repeatedly, I'm not going to violate my oath of office. Constitution's going to be protected, and I'm going to follow the law. And if we don't like the law the way it's laid out, I guess that's something that we could petition to change. And again,
it was your determination on whether there was malice or not, right? That fell squarely on you.
well, I'll tell you what, because this has been a discussion throughout the state. I really focused my evaluation of this case on whether or not the use of force was unreasonable, and that reasonable standard, the good faith standard. Looking at that alone, because I could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these officers lacked good faith, the argument was done at that point. Charges could not be filed.
You know what, Sean? When Alanis was the first one there.
I'm sorry?
Alanis was the first officer there.
Yes.
Followed by Flanagan.
Flanagan?
Flanagan.
Yes.
Flanagan got out of his car by the video camera,
Yeah.
by his dash cam,
Yes.
came out, went around his car, went back around him. Oh, he was the first one that fired on him.
Well, actually, no. That's not correct. So when Ryan Flanagan came out, and this is captured again, guys. I hope this could be helpful because we're trying to explain some things. The question is when the first officer came out, when Ryan Flanagan came out, the belief was that Flanagan came around the car and he was actually the first one to shoot. And I just wanted to clarify. What you saw in there is Flanagan came out. What is captured on the video from across the street, this was the video captured from the couple that's sitting in the car in the Fiesta. What they actually were able to capture is that Flanagan came out, and in his statement he describes trying to attempt to tackle Zambrano. In other words, he's trying to knock him down. You could actually see the aftermath of that attempt, because that is when you capture Ryan Flanagan running from Zambrano as Zambrano is chasing him with the rock held up high like this. It was at that moment that Flanagan had just exited his car, and now he was running. They regrouped. Officer Wright is the third officer to respond to the scene. He's the one that notes that as soon as he got out of the car, he knows that these officers have called for cover code 3. He knows that there was a call over the radio that they're going to have to exceed force shortly. He sees the two rocks in the hand, so he knows that Mr. Zambrano is still armed at this particular time. He gets around the car. As soon as Alanis ducks away from that rock coming at him, and even Officer Wright had to say they were kind of in line, he steps out of the way. That is when Wright takes the shot because he believed he had a good shot at the time.
He folded?
He shot twice, and he shot twice.
Right.
He was the first two,
and that was the first two, and that's what we believe based on both of the Wygren autopsy as well as the Menschel autopsy. It is that shot that is likely the one that hit him in the arm, because remember, what it did is it entered through the side of the arm, out the front side, and then it entered into his chest. The only way it could do that would be as if after he threw it, he's in the process of turning around with the reaction time of the officer and then firing the two shots. The officer even states, hey, once he turned around and started to go away, he stopped. But then they continued to follow him. And that's what they were trying to do, is trying to see if, hey, maybe he's going to stop eventually. They didn't continue to unload in one round, and I think that's an important evaluation, because the gentleman in the back is asking about reasonableness. And what we're looking at is we're looking at that response. You're looking at all the videos, and you can see that after he throws the rock, he turns quickly, but then you see the shots happen almost so from the dash cam video of Flanagan's car. You almost see it's an immediate response from Officer Wright. As soon as that rock passes in front of the car, you can see Officer Wright then fire. And that again is the evaluation, and that actually answers the question of could there be other means, because they've actually now shot the person, they used deadly force, and it had zero effect on them.
How many minutes?
Hold on.
How many minutes into that was
From
that?
the time of the first officer
Isn't it
arriving?
true
That's almost
that
about
Admiral did not have a
that's
taser
5
or
minutes
any
and
kind
20
of less
seconds.
lethal force available to this person?
I'm sorry, can I answer the gentleman's question? Then I'll get to you.
Are you sure?
I'll give you time.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, go ahead.
How much time had gone by between the arriving officers, Flanagan and Wright?
Okay.
For them, you mentioned that there was a
Yeah.
non-lethal weapon in one of the trunks of their cars.
A shotgun.
Whose trunk?
That was both in Flanagan's car and in Wright's.
You mean to tell me how much time went
I'm
by?
sorry. I'm sorry. That was in Wright's car as well as in Alanese's car. The problem was he didn't know what he had. He's responding to a call of a person that's at an intersection throwing rocks. So he's thinking, hey, I'm gonna go up and
Wouldn't
check
you
it out.
immediately think this guy's throwing rocks? Why don't I get the shot?
Well, no, not at all. Because under the circumstances that he's describing, this is one of the questions that law enforcement's facing right now: is the militarization of police. The last thing people want is they want people showing out with their M16s or other serious weapons if that's not needed. And so, and that's what's important about looking at all these statements is Officer Alanese says, hey, I didn't have time because to go back to the car, those weapons are stored unloaded. You have to go through a process, you have to load them up. He felt that his safety was in danger as well as those surrounding that area. There was no time for him to go and regroup. They were calling for backup because hold on. They were asking for immediate backup, and Officer Wright, he arrived, and it was a short time after that deadly force was then responded to with the rock throw.
Correct.
It's kind of interesting
So-
that there's 3 white guys
Hold
up
on,
there,
hold on.
and then community that's over 50% Latino, and you don't have a translator here, so people who don't speak English can understand what you're talking about, and people that are watching coverage can't understand. In a community that's predominantly Latino. And there you are, 3 white guys with no translator, and the community that is mostly Hispanic. Don't you find that kind of ironic?
Now, one certified officer on the force.
So,
Yeah. Let me get to your question.
That's a good point, but the question that I have pertains to Adam Wright. Isn't it true
Hold on.
that he did not have any less than lethal force aside from his firearm on his person, according to the report?
That's correct.
And according to his testimony. So when he arrived on scene and opened fire, he had no other options, isn't that correct?
He did not have a taser on his person. That's correct. He didn't have a taser. The other 2 tasers had been deployed. But again, what you have to look at in this particular case, just like any other case, the 2 other tasers had deployed. At least one of them had no effect on him. There is no reason to believe that if he had the
How would
additional
Wright have known
taser.
that?
I'm sorry?
How would Wright have known that?
The communication has gone out. The communication over the radio indicated
He
that
said
taser has been
deployed. That
deployed.
doesn't mean that it was a successful
Yeah, it
deployment.
doesn't mean it hit.
Well, again, let's take a step back again. Let's take a step back again. If someone's pointing a firearm at you, you don't go for your taser. That's a lethal use of force. Hold on, guys. Can I explain? I want to be able to explain your question because it's important. So when the officer arrives, he sees and he knows that rocks have been thrown at him because that's what the radio traffic of Ryan Flanagan over there says. Hey, he's throwing rocks at us. Cover code 3. So he already knows that this guy is using weapons against the officers. And we have other cases that we prosecuted in Franklin County where rocks being thrown are charged as a deadly weapon. And even the case law supports that. So there's no dispute over whether or not a rock is a deadly weapon, depending on the manner in which it's used. So whether or not a taser would be a valid option or not really depends on the circumstances because they're still presented with that lethal force. The officers had already tried the taser, so just because he didn't have a taser doesn't mean that resorting to his firearm to confront a deadly use of force scenario wouldn't have been justified. Again, we're looking at it from the totality is it reasonable based on all the information that was available to the officers? Is it reasonable based on the view from what the citizens are describing? And that's really what's important. Again, like I'm saying, the citizens have, there were some people that were pretty adamant. I think a couple of them that were pretty adamant that, hey, this was not a justified shoot. That's what their statement was. But then they give a detailed account of what they're observing, and a lot of that is corroboration by the videos that were captured, where you could see the rock, the chasing of Officer Flanagan by Zambrano with the rock in the hand. And so again, we're looking at all of that, and that's probably something that the chief will be reviewing for the standpoint of use of force, whether or not, you know, people have to be required to deploy a taser. I think most people would agree that they don't want them to carry devices if they're not properly trained, and that's what Officer Wright had said, is that he hadn't completed the training. It's training. It's training on a particular tool. And so the officers are trained with their primary weapon with the firearm, but they're also trained at the different agencies with their different standards and policies for the OC spray, for instance, or the taser, or any other device that they carry.
I just think it's worth noting that Adam Wright was the first to shoot, yet he was not equipped to use less than lethal force.
That he was the first to shoot.
Yes.
Sean, we've got video.
Chief Metzger,
Yeah.
was wondering who is conducting the internal investigation for Pasco?
We're conducting it internally. It's an internal, so the police department conducts the internal.
Was there any talk about using someone else to conduct that investigation?
We have had outside experts coming in to help us with that.
Mr. Sant, what are the next steps now? Where do you go from here? What do you do now?
As far as this particular case?
Right.
Well, like I said, I'm open to further discussions. I think it was helpful, despite, you know, some people were pretty contentious when we met back in March, but I think that's important. I think we need to have discussions. I think the community needs to recognize that if mental health is an issue, especially if mental health was determined that to be a factor in this particular case, the drug use, I think there's a need for addressing that, and whether or not additional resources could go to that. I really want to be a part of that. I think that's something that, you know, we do have with transitions. Transitions is a service provided in our community through Lords that is designed to actually be an alternative to jail for people that have committed certain offenses, that could go through that program to deal with the mental health issues and hopefully reintegrate back into our community and be productive. So obviously I want to be a part of that. I've been in those discussions long before this case happened, and I'd like to continue that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a quick one. Well, really a statement. I don't know if you know Spanish, but in one of the videos, the one that you spoke about,
Yeah.
the one with the two couples in the car, you can clearly hear Antonio Zambrano say, "No es justo una piedra," which means this isn't just, it's just a rock. That does not mean just shoot me.
Okay, and I want to be clear as well, because I don't think I've ever said anything that says just because Mr. Zambrano was saying kill me, that's not a basis. Just because someone goes up to you and says kill me, I'm not saying that that's justified. What we have to look at is the circumstances under which those officers were responding to. What someone is saying, if it's not making sense, this is consistent with the other cases that we've had where it's suicide by cop. So. Does any other media, I know we've tried to give everybody the floor, but I know media has deadlines. Is there any other questions first from the members of the media before we maybe open this up for a little bit?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could speak about Officer Flanagan's decision to resign, why he decided to resign as opposed to the other two officers, and sort of what they're going through now.
I have no idea the specifics. All I can say is that I would imagine with anybody going through an event like this, that's going to be traumatic. It's obviously traumatic on the person that was shot, but it's also traumatic and it has an impact on officers. But I haven't spoken with the involved officers, so I don't know why he may have chosen to go to another profession.
Sean,